travel restrictions have caused about 100 passengers to remain stranded at the Manila North Port. Justine Ponsalang with the story.
Around 100 passengers bound for the provinces have been stranded at the Manila North Port since last night. Some LSIs say they could not obtain swab test results because they can't afford the RT-PCR tests at private hospitals. They already tried securing a schedule for free testing at the Carino Grandstand, but because of the overwhelming number of people who also need to get tested for COVID-19, the earliest available date for testing is on April 15. Christian Baldomar and his family, who were supposed to go to Dumaguete, said that their barangay does not require a negative swab test upon entry. But they were suddenly informed that a swab test result is required at their port of destination.
Ang barangay namin ay walang pinapakuha. Tapos yung babaan namin, gawa ng isa lang yung pier. Eh di, doon talaga kami, isa lang ang barko. Eh kung bababa lang kami, eh di dadaan lang kami pagtapos baba eh.
Meanwhile, Jesse Gatburintan and his two companions already have negative swab test results. However, they are still not allowed to board the ship bound for Negros.
Kasi daw po nag-lockdown daw yung Negros, yung sa amin, hindi daw muna natatanggap ng LSI. Tapos kanina yung mga alas 3, yung pinasakyan na nila ulit, siguro nagbago yung ano nila ma'am, ang taga ano lang, Apor, at saka yung ROF, saka yung mismo ma'am, taga Bacolod City po kayo.
They were told that the next ferry bound for Negros is on April 6, but their swab test results will already expire tomorrow. According to the guard on duty at the North Port, the decision on allowing non-APORs and non-ROFs to board the ships is in the hands of the destination LGU. And based on the IATF guidelines, people within the NCR Plus bubble are not allowed to leave the areas under GCQ unless they are authorized persons or returning OFWs. For News 5, Justine Ponsalang. We are One News.
The standoff between the Bureau of Corrections and the Muntinlupa LGU continues as the BuCor stood their ground regarding the controversial wall construction last Saturday. The BuCor maintains that the wall was built for good reason. Gary De Leon with the details.
BuCor renovated the infamous solid wall they built last week on Insular Prison Road, NBP Reservation, Muntinlupa. The Bureau removed half of the brick wall and installed a gate where its employees and emergency vehicle may pass through. But the agency insists the permanent closure of the access road will push through. That despite issues raised by Southville 3 residents, Muntinlupa Representative Rufy Viason and the city government.
Hindi daanan ang bilibid prisons. Only in the Philippines, pinagtatawanan tayo. O, ipagpapatuloy pa natin yun? O gusto nyo, tatahimik lang kami, pakuya-kuya-kuy kami until the last day of our appointment in BuCor.
For their part, Muntinlupa LGU has already raised this issue to Congress and the Justice Department for investigation.
Ang resolution ay hinihiling natin sa Department of Justice through Secretary Guevara na utusan ang BuCor na tanggalin yung road closure kasi ito ay illegal. Pangalawang resolution ay hinihiling namin sa Kongreso na magsagawa ng inquiry in aid of legislation para malaman natin kung bakit bigla-bigla na nagpasara ng kalsadang yan.
The city government is also urging the national government to relocate the National Bilibid Prison to other areas.
Dahil yung pong Bilibid ay hindi na po conducive para sa isang national prisons. Ang dami na pong tao sa paligid. Ang dami na pong mga institusyon sa paligid.
But for the BuCor, this move is long overdue since it has been alleged time and time again that some Southville residents smuggled contrabands inside the prison, such as drugs and cell phones.
2 weeks ago, may sinabol na kami doon sa NS3 din. Nakamotorsiklo sila. Yung dalawang sakay, kumaripas ng kapo. Yung isa, nagamit niya yung motor niya, lumabas. Ano ang tinapon nila? Shabu, dalawang cellphone, tabako, at iba pang contrabands.
And BuCor claims that ever since the wall was constructed, the prison became relatively quiet, and the Bureau is more assured that there will be less prevalence of contrabands inside. They add that the Muntinlupa LGU cannot thwart the Bureau's plan change inside the prison, and that this is their way to protect people from inmates who imperil those living directly outside the prison.
Hindi kami natatakot na gawin ang trabaho. kahit na unpopular, ngayon lang yan.
But the city government of Muntinlupa also appeals to BuCor to respect their jurisdiction and let them know about the projects that may potentially have a big impact in their city. Reporting for News 5, I'm Gary De Leon. We are One News.
The Commission on Audit has flagged 6 municipalities for irregular or questionable fund disbursements in connection with the COVID-19 pandemic. That's according to 6 annual audit reports for 2020 uploaded on the Commission's website. The municipality of San Marcelino in Zambales was called out over lapses in choosing beneficiaries for the Social Amelioration Program. While out of over 3,000 target beneficiaries, only some 1,200 or 38% received the cash subsidy. As for Bacolor, Pampanga, the COA questioned the disbursement of over 150,000 pesos in hazard pay to personnel despite lack of supporting documents showing exposure to hazards. Meanwhile, 4 municipalities in Mountain Province were reprimanded by COA for failure to observe procurement requirements for medicines, equipment, supplies, and materials charged under their Bayanihan 1 grant from the national government. The Commission also noted the municipality's failure to record receipt of donations. Russia's Sputnik V vaccine might soon be produced right here in the Philippines. This as Russian Direct Investment Fund CEO Kirill Dmitriev revealed on One News' The Chiefs that they're now in the final stages of negotiating to set up labs in the country.
We can transfer our vaccine production technology for free, and we want to build those production partnerships in different nations. We already secured such production countries in 10 countries with 20 producers. With Philippines, we're in the final stage of negotiation with actually 2 producers, and we hope to conclude them shortly. I think Philippines can actually be one of the hubs of vaccine production for Asia, and Russia is really committed to it, and we see that from the time we make an agreement, the vaccine production can start within the next 3-4 months of that.
The Labor Department announced that private companies are allowed to hold vaccination programs for their employees. In an interview with 1PH's Sa Totoo Lang, Labor Assistant Secretary Nikki Tutay said they have issued a labor advisory that permits employers to implement vaccination programs in the workplace.
Kung may mga establishments po na kakayanin na po nila, po pwede naman po nila silang mag-adapt ng vaccination program or policy in the workplace. Pero ang importante pong malaman dito ng ating mga manggagawa ay hindi po ito shoulder ng mga manggagawa po natin. Ibig sabihin, hindi po ibabawas sa sweldo po nila, pero ito po ay talagang kumpanya po ang magbe-bear ng cost for vaccination.
Although Tutay clarified that the no vaccine, no work policy is still illegal. This means that employers may not terminate employment or discriminate against workers who will opt out of the free vaccination.
So dapat malinaw po yun. Hindi po ito magiging dahilan para tanggalin po nila yung kanilang mga manggagawa.
Vaccine expert panel member Dr. Jean Solante is appealing to the public to assess their symptoms before going directly to the hospital for COVID19 care. In an interview with Sa Totoo Lang, Solante said young people without comorbidities who experience mild symptoms do not need to be admitted in the hospital. All they have to do is inform their barangays to arrange accommodations in quarantine facilities. But when it comes to senior citizens, Solante says it's better to admit them in hospitals even if their symptoms are only mild, as these can progress easily into a severe case. Solante also enumerated the symptoms that would warrant immediate hospitalization regardless of age.
First onset na pag humihinga ka, medyo merong hirap, no? Parang konting hangin ang pumapasok sa katawan mo. Isa yan. Pangalawa, pag lumalakad ka, papunta ng CR, galing ka sa bed mo, pag lumalakad ka, medyo hirap, hingal ka na rin ng konti, no? And yung pangatlo, pag persistent yung fever mo, tapos pag maski nagkahiga ka lang, merong mabigat sa dibdib mo na parang konti ang pumapasok ng hangin, kailangan mo nang pumunta sa hospital. These are the initial early signs of ongoing pneumonia in your body. Dapat ma-change ang mindset natin, no? Kasi pag tinatanggihan ka sa hospital because you have the mild, because there are more serious patients na mas nangangailangan ng bed sa hospital para ma-closely monitor.
Solante also reminded the public that those presenting mild symptoms or no symptoms at all may just quarantine at home. But if there's no room to use for proper isolation, and if the patient has vulnerable household members, Solante says it's better to go to quarantine facilities. He then enumerated the minimum requirements for those opting to do home quarantine.
If you have a room separate from the other people inside the household, that's one. If you have a separate comfort room that you don't need to go out every time you go to the comfort room. So those are the essentials. And if somebody can take care of you, bringing you food inside that room through the door without entering, pwede rin yan, no? Sa mga mild or yung mga walang symptoms. If you cannot isolate yourself, if you don't have the proper room in your house, and then you have highly vulnerable persons in the house, it's better to go to the quarantine facilities for the isolation.
Over a year into the pandemic, the inequality between people of different races, incomes, genders, and nationalities has intensified. What can the world do to confront these challenges on our road to recovery? Let's watch this.
On March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. At the start, there was hope that the shared fear of the virus would in fact bring people together. It became clear that not all were affected equally.
The High Commissioner says people who are already barely surviving economically may all too easily be pushed over the edge by measures being adopted to contain the virus.
COVID has amplified inequality by race, income, gender, occupation and nationality.
The inequality of the current world environment, it's troubling, and I think it's actually getting worse, which is a big challenge.
The pandemic made long-present inequalities impossible to ignore, from the joblessness to healthcare to education. In February of last year, US unemployment rates were just 3% for whites, 4.4% for Hispanics, and 6% for blacks. A year later, the respective rates were 5.6%, 8.5%, and 9.9%. The COVID death toll in the US is now over 500,000, with the rates 1.9 times higher for black Americans than whites. One positive, COVID has stimulated fresh thinking about ways to protect the most vulnerable. President Biden's unprecedented $1.9 trillion relief program signed into law last week. It expands tax credits for low-income Americans with children, bolsters unemployment insurance, pays out $1,400 checks, and expands rental assistance and food stamps.
Everything in this package is designed to relieve the suffering and to meet the most urgent needs of the nation and put us in a better position to prevail.
COVID has amplified nearly every structural bias that exists, with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen calling the impact on women and minorities absolutely tragic. Now, as the world recovers, many are hoping to address these serious inequality issues for the long term.
And those are the top stories of the hour. Join Riza Diaz later at 2:15 p.m. as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on Signal Play. Just register for a free account at www.signalplay.com so you can stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Charles Lejano. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.